You've decided you're ready to become a parent, and suddenly you're overwhelmed with people who feel they have the right to inform you on the correct way to conceive, give birth, what fears you should have, and the proper way to parent. How do you filter through the opinions? How do you know what's trustworthy information and what's a myth or just plain outdated? Welcome to the Birth Ease podcast. Join your host Michelle Smith and her guests as they cut through the noise and fear by sharing valuable tips, tools, and proven methods that help you connect with your own inner wisdom as you navigate the sacred journey that is pregnancy, birth, and parenthood in a more relaxed and confident manner. This podcast does not constitute, nor is it intended, as medical advice.
Hello, Birth Ease families. Welcome to this heartfelt space. I'm your host, Michelle Smith. In this episode, I have a conversation with Lynn Schulte, pelvic health physical therapist. And I'm releasing the episode a day early to encourage you to join her Birth Healing Summit that Lynn has been hosting for 6 years. It is a free online summit which starts today on April 20th and runs through April 29th. And it's through this Birth Healing Summit that I discovered her work. It is an amazing event and one in which I have learned so much. It's designed for birth professionals and practitioners. However, you are invited to listen in if you are pregnant, postpartum, or as a mother, because the information here regarding pelvic health that you'll find in the summit is incredibly valuable. So I'm so excited to be able to interview Lynn here on the Birth Ease podcast because she will be sharing with us the ways in which healing and understanding our pelvic floor and our pelvic health can enhance our body's ability to give birth and heal postpartum. Lynn Schulte is a women's health physical therapist with over 30 years experience and is the founder of the Institute for Birth Healing. She has been helping moms heal from all the multitude of issues women experience after birth and is now teaching courses to body workers to help them to do the same. She found a common birth pattern that shows up in the pelvis after birth and knows how to effectively release these patterns. Through her Institute for Birth Healing, she offers a certification process to help birth professionals to become birth healing specialists. Welcome, Lynn, to the Birth Ease podcast. I am just thrilled to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I so appreciate any opportunity I get to talk on this topic. So thank you for having me.
It's so important. And I don't think a lot of pregnant women understand. Well, most women, I think, don't understand the way their pelvic floor works and that we can have care before pregnancy, during, and after, and just how important it is. It truly, truly is.
Yes, it is. And I've talked to many childbirth educators and saying, hey, could I come in and give a little talk? And they're just like, oh my gosh, we have so much information to go over that there's no room in this class. And it's like, oh my goodness, but I'm not sure how many of them are actually talking about the physical mechanics of the pelvic joints, the pelvic bones, and the pelvic floor muscles and how it's all meant to work for birth. And so when I have a pregnant mama, and I think another thing that is not recognized is most pregnant people, here's the misconception out there, is that we get pregnant and we just assume the baby's going to come on out, right? Without any problems. What we don't realize is that it's a lot of what we bring in our body to the pregnancy and to the birth that can influence that birth. So there's pre-existing things that a person might be carrying in their body that can influence whether or not that birth is going to go really smoothly or if it's going to be more challenging. And that's really where our current birthing practices are kind of failing birthing people these days. We're really good at taking care of the baby. We're really good at taking care of the mama and making sure everyone's happy and healthy. but we're not really preparing the body per se for the birth experience. And when I have a pregnant mom that comes to me, there's 3 areas of the body that I like to assess. And the first thing is the belly and the uterine mobility. So the uterus needs to have even mobility side to side. And pregnant mamas can actually just take their hands on either side of their belly and just push the baby over as far as they can to the left, and then push it over as far as they can to the right, and see, is it even? Does the baby move as much to the left as it does to the right? And if so, great. That means we have normal balanced tissue in there. But for some people, and the most common issue that I find is people who've had appendectomies. If you've ever had your appendix removed, you have scar tissue in there. Any other lower abdominal surgeries or car accidents or any impacted situations where your belly has been injured or creating scar tissue can limit that mobility. And so with appendectomies, we have scar tissue in that right lower groin area. And so the uterus can't move to the left. And what I find is that those babies tend to get stuck on that right-hand side. And the baby just hangs out on that right-hand side. So a common sign that we might have an imbalance in our abdominal tissues is if your baby only hangs out on one side of your belly and it never really goes to the other side. And so that's going to create abnormal tensions on either the uterus or the abdominal fascia. And then baby's not going to have all that wiggle room to get into the best position to come on out. So that's one of the first things that we really need to assess and make sure that the baby can get into the best position to come on out. We all know we want that baby's head down, right? But we also want to make sure that that head is heading into the pelvic outlet right in the middle. Sometimes there's heads heading over into the left hip or the right hip. And then that's where a baby can be what we call asynclitic,
Right.
where a weird part of their head is coming into the pelvis. And so those are all the things that I want to really look at when I'm addressing a pregnant person that comes to us. So one of the things that I really encourage any mama that is currently pregnant, before you go into labor, go see one of my birth healing specialists and go get your body assessed. They'll assess your belly. They'll also assess all your pelvic bones. It's amazing how much movement those pelvic bones actually do to get a baby through and on out. And if we've had falls on our tailbone, or if you have what I call high risk activities like ice skating, snowboarding, mountain biking, horseback riding, where you've had impacts of falls. I worked with a client who was an ice hockey player throughout her childhood, and her pelvis was so hard and her bones were just so impacted from all the falls. And bone is meant to be kind of soft and spongy, and it's meant to move during the birth process. Well, if it's been injured or impacted, it doesn't prevent the movement, but it can just make it harder. And so I want moms to have as smooth and as easy of a birth as possible. And so looking at these bones and getting them released can be really, really helpful. The third thing I look at are the pelvic floor muscles. The pelvic floor muscles are attached to the pelvic bones. They're we call them the pelvic floor, and they prevent the bones from, if we have too much tension in them, which a lot of people carry a lot of tension in their pelvic floor muscles and they don't really realize it. And that tension can prevent those bones from being opened up for the birth process. So that's the third thing I want to look at. I want to make sure that your pelvic floor muscles have nice springy sponginess. Like if you go to push on your pelvic floor muscles, they should push down and spring like you're pushing on a trampoline. And they should be even side to side. And in a lot of people, we have either too much tone on both sides, or we have tension on one side greater than the other side. And that's just going to prevent your pelvic bones from opening up as easily as possible for the birth. I've always wondered, why do some people, their births are just nice and easy, and why are others so challenging? And I truly believe a big factor in that is the tension and the ability of those tissues to expand and open. And some are carrying too much tension throughout.
That all makes so much sense to me. And what I've observed in labors, what I understand from learning about our whole pelvis and pelvic floor and attending your birth summit. I've learned so much from that and use a lot of it when I'm instructing clients to say, please go see a pelvic health physical therapist or
Yes.
consider some chiropractic care, some cranial sacral care.
Yes.
Yes, to make sure that your pelvis is nice and fluid. And I use your pet door.
Yes.
Yeah, the pet door analogy.
Yes.
And I explain that to clients, and it makes so much sense.
Well, let's talk
Okay.
about that so people who are listening in can talk about that. So I think of the pelvis, to me, the pelvis is the birth door. And the way we treat birth these days is we're just assuming that birth door is going to open. And, for 35% of our pregnant people, it doesn't. They end up having a cesarean birth. So sometimes it only opens part way. Baby only comes through halfway, and then we end up having a cesarean birth. For the rest of the population, it does open, but how easily? And so my analogy is, think of a doggy door that has a flap that's attached at the top. Okay. If you remember back in olden day houses, they have the garage doors. It's usually only a single car garage door that is hinged at the top, and the whole thing flips up.
Yes.
It doesn't roll up. Remember those?
Yes, I do.
We're really dating ourselves,
Yes.
but that used to just open straight up. Well, that's kind of like what a doggy door does, right? It's a flap that's hinged at the top, and it's meant to open up freely, and that's the pelvis. So if you think about the sacrum is that triangular bone at the base of our spine. And that sacrum is meant to be that doggy flap. And the sacroiliac joint is the hinge for birth. And so many people have dysfunctions in that sacroiliac joint. And low back pain is pretty common. Anywhere from 50 to 70% of pregnant people have back pain during pregnancy. To me, doctors will just disregard that as, oh, well, you're pregnant. What do you expect?
Right.
And it's like, no, pain is a sign of dysfunction, people.
Yes.
Dysfunction means something's not happy in there. And we want a very happy pelvis and pelvic floor for birth. And so the doggy door analogy is that sacrum being able to lift evenly up like the doggy flap or the garage door, and the hinges at the top are the sacroiliac joint. And so if that door can't open up, there might be something going on with the hinges, keeping it from being a smooth opening. And then the pelvic floor muscles. Now imagine a dog trying to go through the doggy door that hinges at the top, and he puts his nozzle down, his little nose, to kind of push the flap open. Well, imagine if you had a rock sitting on one side, one corner of that flap, and they can only push up and move the other side. That's tension in your pelvic floor muscles. How much harder is it going to be for that dog to get out that doggy door if we have the big rock on one corner of that flap? That's tension in the pelvic floor muscles. And for some people, they have rocks on both sides.
Right.
And then it just makes it so much harder. So that's why it's so important for us to make sure that our pelvic floor muscles are nice and relaxed, and they have the ability to allow the sacrum to lift backwards. The muscles need to lengthen to allow that sacrum to lift backwards for the baby to come on out. Now, the other piece I want to talk about is that sacrum mobility. The sacrum is key for opening up to allow the baby to come on out. But do you know what happens for the majority of people who are pregnant when you go to sit down and you curve your bottom underneath?
Yes.
And you put all that pressure on the lower part of your sacrum and tailbone. You are pushing that sacrum closed. You're pushing that open door closed. So that's the opposite of what needs to happen in order for that baby to come on out. That sacrum needs to lift backwards and behind you in order for that baby to come on out. But if you spend hours and hours and hours every day sitting on your tailbone and sitting on your sacrum, that is going to make those pelvic floor muscles just get more tight. And then there are some childbirth education classes that are still promoting that we should be doing thousands of kegels every day.
Right.
And I am not a big fan of that.
Yeah.
Because we don't know if we have too much tension in there, then doing more kegels is just going to close up that door. It's going to make bigger rocks in front of that doggy door.
Exactly.
And so what we need to be doing instead is sitting on our sit bones. So sitting at 90 degrees. Those sit bones are called sit bones for a reason. So we need to be getting off of our sacrums when we're sitting so that we're not pushing the door closed. And we need to be squatting in a way where we stick our butt out as we go to bend forward, because that will lift the tailbone backwards. We need to be using our glute muscles throughout pregnancy so that our glute muscle just ever so slightly lifts that tailbone backwards, that sacrum backwards, to give us more space for the baby to come on out. So we need to be doing the opposite of sitting on our tailbone. We need to be lifting it backwards and just making sure that we are not tucking our tailbone under. The other analogy I love when I'm talking about the pelvis is I want everyone to think of a peacock, okay? And your tailbone is the peacock feathers. When you're sitting on your tailbone or when you're standing and your tailbone is tucked under so that your pelvis is, we call it posteriorly rotated, your tailbone is tucked under, your tail feathers of the peacock feathers are down. They're on the ground, okay? And what we need to do is to allow that tailbone to lift behind us, to lift backwards and to lift up towards the ceiling so that now our peacock feathers are showing and they're nice and beautiful and big. And they're up so everybody can see them. So that's the position we need to be in throughout our pregnancy to help encourage that pelvic opening for birth. Okay?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. It really does.
Yeah, so that's the mechanic. Like those are some of the mechanical things that we can do. And I'm sure most people listening in have heard of doing perineal massage.
Yes.
And I'm just curious, a lot of people, I think, and this may be my misconception or perception, most people are doing that perineal massage just at the skin level. I know I was when I was pregnant 20 years ago. And the skin, we're so concerned about tearing that we might be doing that. But yet the focus doesn't need to be at the skin, at that opening of the vagina, down at the bottom, but it needs to be more of the muscles. So instead of inserting your finger in and just working like in the first digit of your finger, you need to slide your finger in past the second knuckle and get it deeper in there. And I want you to think of your vaginal opening as a clock. And 12 o'clock is where your urethra is and also your clitoris. And 6 o'clock is where your rectum or your anal sphincter is, okay? And where you need to focus with the perineal massage, I'm going to call it, I don't want perineal massage anymore. I want pelvic floor muscle massage.
Oh, I love that.
That's where we need to focus.
Yes.
Not the perineum, because to me that, I don't know what people think about with that. I think they think more skin. I don't know. What do you think, Michelle?
Well, it's interesting as you were talking, my mind keeps going back to when I teach and work with couples, and I'm talking about doing the massage, and I'll usually look at the partner if the partner's going to be facilitating, and I'll say, you need to get behind that band of muscles and get in there and massage, right? And the ladies will look at me with these big eyes. They don't know what I'm talking about. And their partner will look at me and say, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Get behind that band of muscles. And it's interesting to me, the disconnect that we women have very often with our own body and our own anatomy, and our beloved knows our body
more than we do.
In that way, often better than we do. So,
well, this is a perfect opportunity for both partners to be exploring this area, right? I mean, one of the things that I love to do when I have a partner that comes in for a session with me is I will teach the partner how to feel the pelvic floor muscles and how to feel and compare one side to the other side. And the thing that I like to do is, so if you insert your finger as far back as you can, or you have your partner insert their finger in vaginally, and you're at 6 o'clock, you're going to be on the rectum. And if there's any stool in there, it's the rectum is a tube. And if there's no stool in there, you might not be able to, it's not as obvious, but if there's some stool in there, you'll obviously feel this tube that is the rectum. And if you just go off to that rectum and you reach back as far as you can, I like to put pressure right in that area with my finger fully inserted vaginally. And I push down right next to the tailbone, actually. So if your outside hand wants to find the tailbone on your partner and they kind of like push up on that tailbone a little bit, your inside hand might feel that motion.
Mm.
And if you do, that's great. You're on one side. Those are the muscles deep back in there. Those, if you're near where that motion is, which is the tailbone, you're near the coccygeus muscle. And the coccygeus muscle is so important for allowing that sacrum and that tailbone to lift backwards. And so I'll have them put pressure. And I do this to my clients that come in, and I'll put pressure deep in that coccygeus muscle and say, hey, this is where the baby's head is going to put a lot of pressure on your pelvis when it's coming down. And talking to a midwife on this current Birth Healing Summit, please listen into Jenny West's interview.
Oh, I was excited to see that she's going to be on there. I love her. I love her work.
Yeah, she is so funny. But she keeps talking about that pressure on that rectum and feeling like baby's going to come out your butthole. And it's like, that's where the baby's head goes. So we need to be okay with that pressure. And I had a client come in after having her baby, and I had done this to her in the clinic. And she said, Lynn, that was so helpful to be able to feel what that feels like prior to the baby's head coming in there, so that when she felt it, she could relax and not fight against it. And Jenny, in her interview, this Birth Healing Summit, keeps talking about the baby going over the same real estate. And that's because a mom will start to feel that pressure rectally and go, oh my gosh, it's coming out the wrong hole. So they tighten back up, and then baby's head comes back up. So we need to be okay with that pressure on those tissues and structures and know that that's okay. Birth is all about letting go and releasing and allowing that opening to happen. And if your partner can help you to feel that, the other thing that I do when I'm doing intravaginal work is have my moms kind of find a low guttural tone, because you hear it all the time. And people who are just birthing, they will just get that like, oh, and it's this really low guttural sound that comes out. And that actually helps your pelvic floor muscles to relax.
Right.
So if you are finding that you're, and your tone is really high, you're tightening your pelvic floor muscles. So your voice and your pelvic floor muscles are very intimately connected.
Yes. When I heard that in one of the previous birth summits.
Yeah. Susan Clinton talked about it last year.
Yes. My light bulbs just went off in my brain, right? And it made so much sense to me.
Right. Yeah.
The way that works, because there's that correlation between our jaw and our diaphragm and our pelvic floor. And to be able to enhance that with sound and help people to begin to feel it, I think is such a valuable tool.
Right. And that's why I really think that as, if you're pregnant, you need to not be afraid to vocalize during the birth. Don't be the good girl. Don't be all nice and quiet. Right. Because, let that sound come on out, because that is helping things to relax, and practice it while you're trying to have a bowel movement. Bowel movements and having babies are similar.
Yes.
That mechanic, that motion is very, very similar. So one of the other things that I teach for birth is the contraction of your abdominal muscles. So many people, and I wish we could get out of this idea of having to push a baby on out, because I really feel like, again, the way moms think it, I keep hearing it over and over in the clinic. They told me I didn't know how to push right. I wasn't pushing right, And it is like, really? And I guess this happens a lot for those that do get epidurals, because you're disconnected. You have no sense. Your body is numb.
Right.
So if you can practice ahead of time, and what I like to help my clients understand is that the uterus can push your baby out whether or not you are conscious or not.
Right.
The uterus knows how to do it. So we really need to just get out of the way. So with that being said, so many people are thinking that they have to push from the top down.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to push the baby out from your diaphragm up by your ribs. And in actuality, the uterus is pushing top down. The uterine fibers are meant to contract from the top down.
Right.
So the uterus is pushing the baby out, and that's what keeps causing the dilation of the cervix. And that's the uterine contractions are doing that. When we go to push, if we're just pushing at the top of the uterus, like trying to bear down with our diaphragm, it's not that effective. It's not helping the uterus out that much. But if we actually breathe out, and I want everybody listening in to this interview to take your hand and put it on your lower belly, and then just do a really long, prolonged exhale, like you're trying to blow out 100 birthday candles. And keep blowing, keep blowing, keep blowing, keep blowing, keep blowing. What do you notice happening to your belly?
It goes inward.
Right? It contracts back as we blow out those candles, right? That pulling back, that's activating your transverse abdominis muscle. And that transverse abdominis muscle attaches to your spine in the back, and it runs directly front to back, and it wraps around and attaches into the front of your belly. And if we just breathe out like we did there, that long prolonged exhale, we're going to be activating our transverse abdominis muscle, which wraps around the entire uterus.
Mm.
So that exhaling and engaging that transverse abdominis muscle is going to give more force to the uterus than you trying to push from the top down. I love the analogy of, think of a tube of toothpaste and you've got the lid off. And if you hold the toothpaste upside down and you're just trying to squeeze at the very top of the toothpaste with the lid off, pointed down, how much toothpaste comes out if you just squeeze at the top?
Right.
And then what happens if you grab the toothpaste in the middle and you squeeze in the middle? How much toothpaste comes out? So that's the difference in that pushing mechanism. If we just breathe our baby out and we're exhaling, prolonged exhaling, we're activating that transverse abdominis, which is hugging the uterus and giving the uterus more force during the contraction.
That makes so much sense to me as someone that has taught hypnobirthing for 17 years. But your explanation of it is the best I've heard.
Oh.
It really is.
Right. Well,
it really is.
It makes sense to me mechanically that that's what's happening. And there is this whole movement of breathe your baby out. And it's like, well, of course, that's exactly what we should be doing. We should be breathing our baby out. And I just invite anybody who has ever been constipated to try this on the toilet. And trying to get that constipated stool to come on out, try breathing out and activating your transverse muscle while relaxing your pelvic floor. That is the mechanics for birth.
Mm.
And so I tell my moms, every time you have a bowel movement for the rest of your pregnancy, feel into what's happening. It's the same thing for when that baby comes on out. It's just going to be a lot more intense.
Right. And it just makes so much sense to me what you're saying. And I feel like sometimes when mamas are pushing, especially if they have an epidural and they can't feel to push or release the baby, they take a breath in and then they exhale, right? And in that exhalation, when you exhale, like if you exhale beyond where you think you can, then your pelvic floor pulls up, correct?
So when we inhale, everything relaxes. So diaphragm, pelvic floor work together like a piston.
Okay.
And so when we inhale, everything relaxes and goes down. And when we exhale, it actually contracts on up and in. So during pregnancy, we do need to focus in on contracting TA and allowing pelvic floor muscles to relax. So it is a little bit of a disconnect that needs to happen there, which actually happens every time you have a bowel movement anyway.
Okay.
The problem is too many people don't know how to poop correctly.
Right. Right.
So that's when they get into trouble during the birth process. So it really is about allowing the pelvic floor muscles to relax while you contract your transverse abdominis, your lower belly.
Okay.
As you draw that back, you can disassociate the two. And that's one of the biggest issue that happens post-birth. And we've got to rewire it and get it working together to help with the healing aspect of things afterwards. But for birth, we really do need to kind of work on disconnecting it. But here's the thing. I've come up with this little moniker that, I want moms, instead of like pushing a baby out, I want moms to hug and hum their baby out.
Mm.
And so what I mean by that is that you're hugging your baby in on that exhale. Okay. So when you hug the baby in on the exhale, you're activating that transverse abdominis all around, giving the uterus nice, more force to do its own contraction. And then by humming, or that low guttural vocalization, finding that low pitch, that's going to relax the pelvic floor muscles. So hug and hum.
Hug and hum. Yes. Because when women push spontaneously, they do make noise. They go, I call it toddler pooping in the corner. Right? What does a toddler do? They squat and they kind of, and their jaw is open. It's an open jaw, it's an open bottom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're, and they kind of make these sounds, and it's a downward release. But I think what happens sometimes when women push with an epidural is they take that breath in and they pull everything up, and then they hold it.
Yeah.
And they're pushing in their face, and there's no release downward.
Yes.
It's all diaphragm up.
Yeah. And that's why if we can just exhale, if you just exhale during the pushing phase, depending on how high up that epidural was, you should still have some transverse activation.
Okay.
If you just breathe out, and that's unfortunately too many people are being directed to purple push in the hospitals, especially. And I'm not a big fan of that. That can create some of the biggest problems postpartum when we have people purple push. And a part of that is the position that we are in, because when you are in an epidural, when you do have an epidural, you have to be on your bed. And when you are in the bed, then they kind of have you curl up. So you might be on your elbows, or you're curled forward. So now we have even more pressure on your sacrum. And remember, we were talking earlier about how that sacrum needs to lift backwards. So if you're on your back and we have pressure on that sacrum, it can't move backwards. So now your entire pelvis has to lift up in order to open up for the baby.
Right.
So I know some people are starting to get a little bit clever with that, and there's halfway rolling moms off to their side, so that there's not direct pressure on the sacrum, which is huge. But it's just not the most ideal position. That we need to understand that birthing in a hospital on a bed with our legs up and on our backs is only for the benefit of the doctor.
Right. I've been horrified lately because there's some hospitals where they're still wanting to put the mom's legs in stirrups while the baby's head is emerging.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a whole nother subject. But
yes. But yeah, that's not the most ideal position. And, I love hands and knees. I love supported squat. I love being upright, right? Let's use gravity to help the situation out. And so it just, we get a little bit trickier when we introduce that epidural, because now your legs aren't functioning well. And so now you have to be in the bed once you get that epidural. So you need to work with that. And if you have partners or people that are there that can help you get on your hands and knees with an epidural, go for it. That would be ideal, because that allows the sacrum to lift backwards. The pelvis is not being hindered at all. And it's so much easier for the baby. So
yeah, hands and knees is a great position.
Love that.
Yeah, it really is. So one of the things that I learned from a client that was a pelvic health physical therapist was that she said the first place that can tighten in our bodies as human beings when we become afraid is our pelvic floor.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's the pelvic floor muscles that anal sphincter muscle is that whole area of the pelvic floor is our root chakra. It's a special energy center in our body. It's meant to have energy to flow down into the earth. It's our way that we ground down into the earth. And when we are not feeling safe and secure, that is the first area that tightens up to help protect us. And so I feel that so much when I do intravaginal work. You can just sense the muscles that have just been held so tightly. The people who are butt clenchers, people who walk around, tucking their pelvis under and clenching their butt, that could be part of that safety and security thing. A lot of times we all have core holding patterns in our body. And these core holding patterns usually can get set when we're kids. Something happens to us and the things that happen to us the first 6 years of our life goes directly into our subconscious mind.
Right.
And so if something happened where we didn't feel safe, as a 6-year-old, you don't have any rationalization. And your mind can't say, Mom or Dad yelled at me. It can't say, oh, Mom and Dad are in a bad mood. It's not my problem, right? If Mom and Dad are yelling at me and I react, it could be that tightening. It could be something much worse that is creating more. We could be being violated or even emotional abuse, verbal abuse. It doesn't have to be sexual abuse to create tension in the pelvic floor muscles. And so we need to become aware of how much tension are we holding in these tissues and in this area. And I have learned over the years, I work very differently than most pelvic floor physical therapists because I work energetically and I work with the emotions and trauma and all that. And when I am doing intravaginal work, I can sense whether or not those tissues are being held from maybe it's more an emotional or trauma, or there's not a feeling of safety. There's a lack of flow happening in that pelvic space of the energy. And so we need to really work to help allow our clients to be able to relax and let go. But if that's something that happened when you were 6 years old, it's in your subconscious mind. You're not consciously aware of how you're holding and keeping those muscles tight. We need to go back, and this is the work that I love, is it does kind of incorporate a lot of psychology with the work, but it's all about listening to the tissues in the body because the issues are in our tissues.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I always say the body remembers.
Absolutely.
The cells remember. We carry it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So important. And so that's why we can't sometimes just think our pelvic floor muscles into relaxation. You can consciously be aware of it for a few minutes and you may be able to oh yeah, that relaxed. But then you go about your day and then you tune into it and it's like, oh my gosh, they're tight again. And you may tune into it and you go, okay, I'm relaxed. And it's going to keep happening until you get to that limiting belief or until you get to that part that helps you to shift that response in your body and your tissues. And then you can let go.
Right. Right. And I found too that if I'm feeling tense and I check, my jaw is typically tight. And if I check, my pelvic floor is tight.
Yes.
Because there's that correlation. So let me soften my jaw, take some breaths, let me relax my pelvic floor and help release that tension.
Yeah. Awareness and breath are two of the biggest tools that we have. So just becoming aware of how relaxed are my pelvic floor muscles or how tight are they? Do I tuck my butt under and clench my cheeks, throughout the day? It's amazing how many people do that subconsciously and don't even realize they're doing it. So if we can bring it into the awareness is the first step in making change.
Right.
And I love going into the deeper dive of what's really being held in these tissues. What do these tissues really, really need? And a lot of times it's helping the smaller part of us, the little girl that, was abused or, was disregarded in whatever way, helping to heal her so that we heal that response that's in our body. we can heal it with our mind. We can get to it. I just think it's a heck of a lot harder because we do have to reprogram that subconscious mind. And when we can go into that subconscious mind and release what's being held in the tissues, it creates a much greater healing. And you don't have to think so hard. You don't have to work so hard to make it happen. So that's the work I love doing.
Well, as a hypnotherapist, that makes so much sense to me. And what I understand about the body and how the body can hold trauma, hold patterns, and the energetics of the body, everything you're saying, I resonate so powerfully with it.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that a pregnant person, especially a pregnant person who has had multiple miscarriages and now they're finally pregnant, they are unconsciously willing that baby to be okay. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they go through those first pregnancies, and if they've had multiple miscarriages, they're always wondering, is this going to be okay? Is this one going to be okay? And what I find is that by the time they get to that 40-week mark where baby's ready to go, there has been so much unconscious holding that there's no release of that energy. So then babies, they stay in there for quite a while.
Yes. I have found that in my work and working with women that are at risk for preterm labor.
Yes.
And so doing birth hypnosis techniques to help keep the baby in. And then we would work on, now let's prepare to release the baby, because for so long it's been keep the baby in, keep the baby in, keep the baby in.
Right. Yes. So we just need to be aware of that. Right? Especially, if it's not preterm labor, but there were multiple miscarriages in there, we do need to, when we get to that 40-week mark, we need to say, oh, okay, I can let go and become aware of that so that we can release that and welcome baby to come on out. And checking in with our pelvic floor muscles they're a key indicator. Like we said, the issues are in the tissues. So if those pelvic floor muscles have a lot of tension, a lot of holding, that baby's not going to want to come on out. And I also tune into the energy flow in that root chakra. We want to make sure that energy is flowing down between your legs, down into the earth. And that's one of the things that I teach in my doula course and in my pregnancy courses. I teach professionals how to feel in for that. And it's so interesting because we can have tension on one side of the body, or we can have tension on the other side, or we can have tension in that root chakra that just stops the energy flowing. And I have a funny story. I had a midwife that came to see me. She was having some symphysis pubis dysfunction. So that in the front of the bones in the front, down low by your pubic hair, there's a pubic bone there. And she was having some pain in there. And she'd been having this for a month, but our schedules didn't align for her to be able to get in until she was 40 weeks pregnant. And so she came to see me, and she was walking in and she couldn't take off her shoes one foot at a time. She couldn't stand on one foot. It was really bothering her. And when I assessed her, I was like, this is not a physical thing. Like her bones were everything felt good in her tissues. But then I felt into the energy, and it was like she was so blocked on the left side of her body. There was no energy flowing down that left side. And so the left side of our body represents our feminine energy, and the right side represents our masculine energy. So depending on what side's not flowing, we go to check it out. So left side, it's all about mothering or the feminine. So I asked her, I said, so how do you feel about becoming a mom? She's like, oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait to meet the baby. And I'm tapping into her energy in the pelvic space this whole time she's talking, and nothing's happening. The energy's still frozen. So I'm like, okay, that's not it. And I go, so how's your relationship with your mom? And she goes, oh boy, mom's a narcissist. And she starts talking, the energy starts flowing. And so I'm like, all right, we're on the right topic, right? So the tissues guide me into what's right or what's wrong or what's working and what's not working. So the energy starts flowing, and I go, so what's going on with mom? She goes, well, I'm just not clear on how, I really don't want her at the birth, but I don't know how I can avoid that, right? And so she gets really clear, and she goes, okay, well, I'm just going to go into labor, and I'm going to have the baby, and my husband and I are just going to enjoy the baby for 24 hours, and then we'll call my mom and let her know. And she got really clear on that, and she walked out of my clinic in labor and had the baby 5 hours later.
Wow.
And she was able to put her shoes on without any pain.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot that can happen energetically in that holding ability or in that tension in the muscles and everything. And so if we can work with what's showing up in the body, we can release and allow that energy to flow. Again, we want balance. We want the muscles to be balanced, and we want the tissues to be even, and we want the energy to be flowing evenly for birth.
All of this, again, just makes so much sense to me and the work that I've done with clients. It's just interesting to hear it play out as you assess the pelvic tissues.
Yeah. Well, I say the pelvis doesn't lie.
Mm,
That's why I love working in this space, because it really is our powerhouse as women, as birthers of babies. This pelvic space it's our powerhouse. It's our home. And too many of us are disconnected from the space. We have a down there attitude in this society.
right. Right. Too much shame.
Yes, yeah. And we need to get rid of that. We need to reclaim this space, because this is our power. And I tell you, I first started learning how to work with the energy in the pelvic space. And I was kind of doing a little bit of it with my clients in the way I knew how. And then I went and I took this training. Wild Feminine is an excellent book. And Mothering from Your Center. Those are two resources I encourage anyone who's interested in more of the energetic aspects of birth to check out, from Tammy Kent. She's a women's health PT in Portland, and she's amazing. And so I went and I took her work, and then I came back and I started implementing it in the way that I learned with her. And I tend to only need to see my clients once to get them better, depending on what they're dealing with.
Wow.
And so I would see these women, and then I wouldn't see them anymore. But then I started seeing their friends, and their friends came in and would say, "Oh my gosh, you changed Susie's life. Oh my gosh, you changed Amy's life. That's why I'm here." And I'd be like, wow, all I did was balance out their pelvic energy and get them connected to their pelvic energy. And it was changing people's lives. And that's when I realized how powerful this work is and so important. So that's why I'm so passionate about this work and teaching it to other birth professionals, anybody who can put hands on people. This body of work is amazing to work and be able to shift the energy. Even doulas and midwives can learn parts of this. And I have courses and online trainings for birth professionals. And I also have trainings for moms too, to help learn what they can do to prepare their bodies, to help it to heal. Now, we haven't even gotten into the recovery aspect. Maybe we save that for another podcast, Michelle, because there's so much to talk about with the birth. But there's all kinds of trainings. I've taken everything that I know and everything I want moms to know about birth and recovery, and I put it into some online courses. So I just encourage everyone to check out my website if they're interested in learning more. It's laid out very easily to digest. So I would just encourage people to check that out.
So what is the website where they can reach you?
So instituteforbirthhealing.com. So, and that's FOR. So instituteforbirthhealing.com is our website. And that's where we have a mom's side and we have a professional side to the website. So if you're a mom, you can go check out the mom side, and that's where all of our online courses are. And if you're a professional, you can go to the professional side and check out all the offerings we have for you there too.
Yeah, I didn't realize you had a course for doulas, which is good to know. I figured it needed to be someone with license to touch, like a physical therapist or a massage therapist or a midwife.
Yeah, my main trainings are for body workers. So I have a certification to become certified as a birth healing specialist, and that is for body workers. But just earlier this year or late last year, I forget when, I put a doula course together, and it's online. And then I also just got done completing a midwifery course. So for a course specific for midwives. And I'm really excited about that one because I do teach them a lot of the intravaginal techniques that are really needed for birth and for recovery afterwards. So I'm really excited for them to get that into their hands. And for doulas, I teach a lot of the techniques that can help facilitate the birth process. So you learn a lot about what we talked about with mechanics and how to instruct your moms to prepare their body better for birth. Some things that you can do during the birth process to help facilitate the birth opening, the pelvis opening, and then things that you can do to help facilitate that whole healing process afterwards. So there's a lot in there. And then I also have a Confidence in Your Core, Pelvic Floor and More course that is really great for anyone. I would encourage you to take it while you're pregnant, but it's really all about the core and the pelvic floor. It talks a lot about what needs to happen for birth, about the healing afterwards. So both of those, the confidence in the pelvic core, pelvic floor, and more. And I have simple steps for a smoother birth and a faster recovery that are some other things. So really those two is like everything I want a pregnant person to know about birth and how they can really help themselves with that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's so good to know.
Thank
I'll be referring my
Yeah.
clients to it for certain, because I know just from listening to you over the years, the power of what you are teaching and the importance of it. So I'm excited that those courses are available to moms, because sometimes they are struggling in pregnancy or postpartum with leaking of urine and painful intercourse and pelvic floor pain or any number of things.
Yeah.
And it's nice to know that they have a good resource and that they can heal, because there's a lot of conflicting information out there too.
Yes, there is. Yeah. When I first started working with postpartum moms, and this is over 12 years ago now, I was shocked at the lack of information out there on the internet for postpartum healing. There was nothing. There's a little bit about diastasis, but now there's a plethora of information. And I just want people to know that my information comes from the thousands of postpartum women that I've worked with over the years. And I've discovered that there's a common pattern that the body goes through in order to get a baby out. And so I kept seeing in all my postpartum clients these same patterns. And I figured out how to release those patterns. And again, moms were getting off my table in one session. Their back pain was gone. They stopped leaking. Their pelvic floor muscles were able to activate so much better. They were able to have intercourse without any pain after one session.
Wow.
And so I started putting on YouTube everything that I was finding in the postpartum body. And I started getting emails from people all over the world saying, oh my gosh, I have exactly what you're talking about. Do you know anybody in my area that can help me? And I didn't, because everything that I discovered, I learned myself. I learned from the bodies that were laying on my table. I learned from the moms that came to see me. I didn't learn it from another course. And that's when I knew that I needed to start the Institute for Birth Healing and start training other professionals on what I knew, and because it was so effective. And I'm really happy to say that it's not just me, that all of my other trained professionals are getting the same results as I am. I had a midwife come and take my courses early on, and my schedule was too packed. And I had a pregnant mama reach out to me saying, I'm having pelvic pain. And I sent her to this midwife because she had just come and taken my training. And I checked in with the midwife and I go, hey, how'd it go? And she goes, well, I just reached out to check in on her. And she said after that one session, she wasn't having any more pain. And I'm like, yes, because I can get those results. And now other people are getting those results too. So that's super exciting for me. And that reminds me, I just want to share one other thing for moms who are pregnant with a second pregnancy and you're dealing with pelvic pain. If you did not have this pelvic pain in the first pregnancy, but now you've developed pelvic pain in a secondary pregnancy, your pelvic pain is from that first birth. Your body hasn't gone back together like it needs to. And now you add a pregnancy to it and the relaxin hormones from the pregnancy, your pelvis isn't as stable as it used to be prior to that first birth. And that's how I teach my practitioners how to help get the bones back to their normal position again. And that's what this midwife did, was she helped the bones come back together again. And now during a pregnancy, she didn't have any more pain again. And so I hate that there are moms out there in pain and they don't need to be. So please, if again, I don't want to dive into the whole symphysis pubis dysfunction. There's so many different things that could be going on there. But if you did not have pelvic pain in your first pregnancy and now you're pregnant again and now you've developed pelvic pain, it's from that birth. You need help getting your bones out of that birthing pattern. And any of my birth healing specialists can help you. If you go to my website again, there is a directory on it where you can reach out to any of the practitioners on that directory. and go see them. They can help you out. And a lot of us are doing things virtually now too, and that's even effective.
Wow.
So please reach out and get the help, get the support that you need, because you don't need to be in pain. And that's why I've just become so passionate about this work, is that there's way too many people that are suffering out there when they don't need to be, when there is help. So I just want to help moms. I just want moms to know that there is support and that you don't have to be suffering, either during pregnancy or after birth.
I'm sitting here listening to everything you're saying and taking it in. And having worked with midwives for so many years, I just feel like this work would be so valuable for them, because if you can help a mom during pregnancy, it's going to make the birth so much easier. Or if there's an issue going on in the birth and they know how to address it, it's going to, I would think, potentially shorten the labor, make it easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jenny West, who is a midwife, and she's been a midwife for 30 years. She heard me talk at a birth psychology conference last year. And so she came earlier this year and took my pregnancy course. And her jaw kept dropping. She's so funny. Please listen to that interview. She is so funny, but her jaw kept dropping during the course because she was like, oh my God, now I know why the baby's stuck. Now I know why when this happens, when I see this, what I need to do now. And she's like, oh my gosh, every midwife needs to know the mechanics that a PT knows from the pelvis. And every midwife needs to have this understanding that I teach in my pregnancy course. And now I've covered the majority of it in the midwifery course, so they can get that access there. And then if they want to learn more and they do more body work, then they should come and take the pregnancy course. So that was really fun to hear Jenny say that. She was like, oh my gosh, she was still blown away months after the course, going, I'm going to be so much more effective in births now because I'm going to know what to do mechanically, help the baby and the mom.
Yes, I believe it.
Yeah.
Everything you're telling me, I'm so excited about.
Yeah.
So your birth summit, when this airs, will have started today on the 20th.
Yes.
And tell us more about it.
So every year I put together a birth healing summit, and this is our 6th one in 2020, the 6th one that I've done. And I interview experts from all over the world, all around different topics around healing after birth. So we talk about diastasis, prolapse, core activation. We talk about painful intercourse. We go into the energetics of birth. We even talk about difficult behaviors. This year, we're talking about difficult behaviors in our children and how that can be from their actual birth. So that's with Annie Brooks. We have some craniosacral therapists, Bowen technique therapists that we interview. Jenny Burrell and I talk about the magic of soft tissue rehab in diastasis. I talk about using our intuition and energy with birth and stuff. So the summits are geared more towards the birth professionals, because we're helping birth professionals to help moms heal after birth, but yet moms can still listen in and still learn. And so the summit is free. It's 10 days long this year. So we have 20 interviews. 2 interviews a day will be released, and you'll have 48 hours to listen into those 2 interviews. And then the next day, 2 more get released. So that's the free version. You have limited access to the video interviews, but we also have the ability to purchase the summit, purchase all of the interviews, and you can have lifetime access to it. And you also get the audio and transcript, audio download file, and then the transcript as well. So there is a benefit to purchasing the interviews. You can refer back to them. I think I go through the interviews 3 or 4 times, and I learn something new every time. So there is a benefit to being able to review things.
Yeah. Like I said, I have learned so much.
Me too.
From the summits. I really have.
Yeah.
I really have.
Yeah, I love doing them. I learned so much, and it's really changed my practice too, the way I practice and what I say now. And, it's just a collective wisdom of really good information. And that's why, because when I started out, there was nothing on the internet about healing after birth, and now there's almost too much. So we don't know what's good and what's not good. And that's why I try to bring the best together and get really good information that I trust and know, and put that out there so that moms can really rely on that information.
Yeah, and I'm excited that you have that course for families.
Yes.
That'll be invaluable. So I like to end our conversation with my guest sharing a pearl of wisdom or something you just want to leave the Birthies community with.
Mm. Well, I actually want to share two pearls if you don't mind, because
Please, please.
because
I would talk with you for hours.
I know.
But
I know. Yeah. So my pearl for pregnancy is make sure you get your body assessed. Make sure that your body is ready for birth. And seeing one of my birth healing specialists and just getting things checked out. And if you can't see someone, pain is one of the big guides. If you're having pain, that means there's a sign of dysfunction, and getting some help and support, getting some body work. That's really what I want. Get that love and support on your body prior to you go into birth. Okay, that's critical. And then my other pearl of wisdom is after the birth, please know healing is always possible. That there are only a couple of things that happen during a birth process that may need surgical intervention to be made whole again. But for the majority of the things that you're dealing with post-birth, you can heal from them. So please don't give up on that, and get some love and support with your body afterwards. And I think my birth healing specialists are going to be some of the better resources for you in that birth healing process. So know that healing can happen.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you so much for our time together. And if you're listening, check out the summit. I promise, whether you are a birth professional, an expecting mom, or a postpartum mom, you will gain so much. So thank you again, Lynn, for all of your wisdom and taking the time to share with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. I so appreciate this.
You're very welcome. And thank you, families, for listening. I know that there are so many shows out there and many ways that you could be learning and spending your time. So please know that my guests and I truly appreciate you listening. And if you're enjoying the show, please share it with a friend. And you can rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Because when you do, that helps get the show and the information out to more people. And please remember, there is support out there for you. I am offering virtual sessions, and my Birthies Method Childbirth Education course is available online with video chat sessions, and it includes instruction on the creating of a relaxation habit, something I feel we all really need right now. And it also includes the audio recordings to practice with. I will also be offering a complimentary course. Many prayers and much love to you all. We will get through all of this together.
For more great conversations like these, or to find out more information and access Michelle's library of amazing guests, go to birthiesservices.com/podcast. For more information on the Birthies method, Michelle's classes, meditations, and other services, go to birthiesservices.com.